Galw'r aelodau.
I call the members to order, and the first item on our agenda this afternoon is questions to the First Minister, and the first question is from Michelle Brown.
Thank you. What assessment has the First Minister made of improvements to hospital waiting times since he first became First Minister?
Well, I'm pleased the member acknowledges the improvement. I recognise there's more to do, which is why we've invested an additional £30 million this year to build on the progress made over the last 2 years and to reduce waiting times further by March 2019.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister, and I'm sure you'd like to make that inference from my question, but in your final speech to Labour conference as First Minister, you made a great play of saying that what you have achieved in Wales shows what Labour can do when in power. Perhaps you were caught up in your DMAB hopping happiness, but you forgot to mention that since becoming First Minister, the percentage of people waiting longer than 4 hours in A&E has got worse. The number of newly diagnosed cancer patients starting treatment within the 30-day target has got worse. The number of urgent route cancer patients starting treatment within the target 62 days has got worse, and the number of patients waiting longer than 26 weeks for treatment has also got worse. So, First Minister, don't you think that rather than your record being a cause for celebration at what Labour can do for the UK, it's actually a stark warning of what Labour will do to the UK if given the opportunity?
Well, the number of people waiting over 36 weeks in July is 31% lower than July of last year, 52% lower than the high point of August 2015. We expect continued improvement this year. The median waiting time in Wales is reduced from 10.9 weeks in September 2017 to 8.9 weeks in July of this year. We also continue to show significant improvements in diagnostic weights. Performance continues to improve, even with the additional diagnostic tests being reported from April 2018, with the number waiting over 8 weeks at the end of July being 24% lower than July last year and 82% lower than the high of January 2014. Now, I could go on with more figures that show the improvement. One thing I can say to her is that a Labour government in Westminster would ensure that there are sufficient resources made available for the Welsh Government and also sufficient resources to turn around the dire performance of the NHS in England.
Angela Burns. Thank you. I'd like to just talk about the NHS in Wales. I didn't realise you were responsible for the one in England as well. Your figures do sound absolutely superb, First Minister, and I don't quarrel with the improvements where the improvements are. However, of course, those improvements aren't universal. As you know, the £50 million that was given last year, a chunk of it had to be recouped because health boards didn't meet the targets that they were set by the Health Secretary to achieve those reductions in those key areas. Another £30 million this year. How confident are you that that will be able to be spent wisely by the health boards? And how can you evidence that those who didn't spend it well last year and had to have it snatched back will be able to do something useful with it this year to continue to make sure that reductions in waiting times, where they are seen, are universal and it's not just in pockets throughout Wales?
Well, that can be done through the development of the board's 3-year integrated medium-term plans. They are providing detailed capacity and demand profiles for this year, and they are required to show clear trajectories as to how they plan to continue to reduce waiting times for diagnostics and for treatment. In the longer term, of course, we do recognise the need to transform the way services are delivered, and that's why, of course, we've set up a £100 million fund to develop new ways of working.
Mandy Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, one of my constituents reported seeing 15 ambulances queuing outside the North Wales Emergency Department not long ago. This is the Health Board still under special measures, still under your government's watch. That is 15 ambulances not available to help those desperately needing help elsewhere. This now seems to be the norm. What is your government doing to address this situation in the North Wales region, and when will we finally see the impact of your special measures?
Well, I don't know where she's talking about, and without any more details, it's difficult to comment. What I can say to her, of course, is we've seen month on month a sustained improvements in ambulance response times. I can tell that in August there were 89,419 attendances of Welsh A&Es. That's an average of 2,884 attendances per day. The vast majority of patients continue to receive timely care. And in August, 80% of patients were admitted, transferred or discharged within 4 hours. There are, of course, times when A&E is busier than other times of year and indeed other times in the week. But we see from the ambulance response times and of course the performance in A&E that the vast majority of people get treatment when they need it at an appropriate time.
Question 2, Sian Gwen.
Question 2, Sian Llawn. What is the Welsh Government's long-term vision for the development of bus services in rural areas?
Well, a sustainable bus network is vital to people who live in rural communities, and we will, of course, work with our partners to fund and provide access to key services and facilities to tackle road congestion, bus punctuality and air quality. And as part of that strategy, we want to ensure we improve that network, and there will be an opportunity over the ensuing years, because we now have the power over buses to create legislation in order to ensure that the problems that we've seen over the years, where companies are competing with each other and then aren't able to carry on with services, we can give more assurance to people, not just in the rural areas, but in the urban areas too.
But among all those using public transport, 80% use buses in rural areas, like parts of my constituency in Arfon. There are no trains available, and the bus is the only option for people without cars to travel to work and to access crucial services. But the truth is that we need to transform bus services in rural areas, and Plaid Cymru wants to give far more power to local councils so that they can arrange appropriate services along with local bus companies. There are some communities who have stated an aim to have an integrated transport system, which would include using hydrogen and electric vehicles in order to fill some of the gaps in current services. So what practical support can you as First Minister give towards pilot schemes of that kind?
Well, of course, we are open to seeing what kind of a bid would be received from any local authority. But one thing I would say is that it's all important to ensure that local authorities collaborate with each other, because the truth of the matter is that people don't just travel within one county, they travel from one to another. And so the cross-boundary services should receive the same kind of attention as those in-county. But of course, we wish to work with the local authorities and also the bus companies to ensure that the system is more sustainable ultimately.
We need, I think, to look at how rural bus services are delivered because they'll never be run commercially, of course. Now, Welsh Government, local authority and operators, I believe, needs to come together to form a partnership, and that partnership doesn't exist at the moment. Can Welsh Government take a leading role in forming such a partnership?
Well, one of the difficulties, of course, is that we have seen bus companies collapse, and as a result, services are CA break. Quite often, of course, they are re-provided by another provider. We've seen Arriva, for example, pull out of all of cadeirio'r, in effect, despite the fact they operated the bus services there. And, of course, new companies did come forward, but again, there was uncertainty, and again, there was a potential gap in service. Now, we consulted, as he will know, last year on proposals that would strengthen the arrangements for the planning and delivery of local bus services in the future. And, of course, we will need to look over the next few years at how we are able to ensure a continuity of service where that service is not subsidised and where, of course, the private operator can do however they want. Now, that clearly is not a sustainable model for the future, but now, of course, we have the powers that we've asked for so long over the bus network. Now there's an exciting opportunity to craft a more integrated and sustainable network in the future.
Lee Waters.
Yeah, the advances in technology have got huge potential to improve the passenger experience and improve the viability of buses. The Welsh Government have been funding the Bookabus project in Ceredigion and Carmarthenshire, which has used demand-responsive model to make public transport viable in smaller routes. That sort of approach, merged with app-based technology, has got huge potential. Anybody who's booked a taxi by an app knows you can order the time, you can know the price, you know how long it's going to take. Would the First Minister look at how that sort of technology could be applied to buses right across Wales to make public transport a viable day-to-day option for people?
Yes, I do. In many rural areas, as the member is right to say, Bookabus has been hugely important in terms of being able to provide public transport where otherwise none would be made available. As we see technology develop, as he rightly says, then there is the opportunity to increase flexibility to have a better idea of where demand is at particular times of day, and of course for people to be sure that a bus will turn up when they need that bus. It's a blurring in some ways of the distinction between a bus service and a taxi service in some parts of Wales. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It creates that kind of flexibility, and I think it's absolutely right to say that with technology now, there is ample opportunity for us to extend more flexible bus services into parts of Wales that perhaps haven't seen a bus service for many, many years.
Questions now from the party leaders. Leader of the Opposition first, Paul Davis.
First Minister, do you believe that Natural Resources Wales is fit for purpose?
Yes, I do.
Well, let me remind you, First Minister, that this organisation is, of course, directly accountable to your government. It's in receipt of £180 million of public money every year, yet they are responsible for a litany of failings which have significant cost to the public purse. In just 5 years since its establishment, NRW have had their annual accounts qualified for 3 consecutive years, and they have undersold Welsh timber without a proper tendering process, resulting in a loss of £1 million to Welsh taxpayers. The public are calling for heads to roll. We need accountability. Has anyone at NRW actually been sacked for these failings?
Well, he will know, of course, that the chair is gone, and the next step will be to appoint a new chair. He will know that there is a new chief executive who is in place, somebody with huge experience, particularly as part of the court service. And it has been to do, particularly, with the issue of timber contracts, for which there is no rational explanation, and that is something that they have had to explain in terms of what they plan to do, particularly for the future. But I think it's wrong to say that the entire organisation somehow isn't fit for purpose. There is no problem, for example, with its permitting regime or the way that it does that, but there clearly has been an issue with timber.
Well, I put it to you, First Minister, there is a theme here when it comes to holding public bodies to account, and that's a failure on your government's part to completely make sure that bodies are held to account and are open and transparent. There is no denying that Natural Resources Wales's finances are a complete mess, and I know that this concern is actually shared by some of your own Assembly members. Now, what concerns me and others is the impact this financial incompetence will have on our natural resources and the communities that actually depend upon them. Instead of focusing on implementing bans, such as the ban on shooting on NRW land, which actually harms the rural economy, your government and NRW should be focusing on what it can deliver legally to protect our precious natural resources and the communities that actually rely on them. And instead of washing your hands of this, and given it appears that not one person at NRW has been sacked, the buck stops with you, your government and your minister. How is your minister being held accountable for what's gone wrong?
Well, so this is about pheasant shooting now, is it? So we now understand what this appears to be about. What I can say to him is this: he gives the impression that the same personnel are in place as were there when the timber contracts were dealt with. That's not true. The chair is no longer there. The chief executive is still new in the job. She was appointed earlier this year, and she is somebody with extensive experience of working in public sector organisations. I can say that the Cabinet Secretary has received a clear commitment from the Chief Executive that she's fully committed to learning lessons, and the organisation will need to, and to making sure that NRW makes the necessary improvements to do the right things in the right way. I can say that the Chief Executive has also given that assurance to the Public Accounts Committee, taking full responsibility for the organisation, and she has an enthusiasm to support staff to bring out the best in them.
Plaid Cymru leader Adam Price. Thank you, Llywydd.
As the ink begins to dry on last week's resignation letter, the focus is naturally shifting to the legacy you will leave behind. Close to a quarter of our people and a third of our children in poverty. Life expectancy in reverse and falling quicker than anywhere else in Europe. A flat-lining economy with Wales stuck in perpetuity at the bottom of the league table. Doesn't this epitomise your government? A poverty of ambition that is the fundamental cause of the poverty of our people. Do you regret leaving behind an economy that even former communist countries are now outstripping?
Well, first of all, can I welcome him to his position as leader of Plaid Cymru? I think And this, of course, his first question. He's the 10th party leader that I've faced across this chamber, which tells you something about the success of the Welsh Labour government in remaining government for that time. Can I also pay tribute to his predecessor, Leanne Wood? Leanne is somebody with whom we tussled across this chamber and outside, but none of it was ever personal. And certainly I know she's done a great deal for the position of women in politics in Wales, and I know she still has a great deal to offer our nation. Well, let's compare and contrast here. Unemployment is 3.8%. That is lower than the UK average, and that was something that nobody could ever have thought would happen 10 or 15 years ago, but that is the reality of it. We've seen the highest figures, the best figures for foreign direct investment for 30 years, with investment projects, the length and breadth of Wales that have brought many, many jobs into Wales, and importantly, high-skilled jobs as well, not jobs that are here because wage rates are low. If we look at education, what we have done in terms of supporting our students, what we have done in terms of raising standards in Welsh schools, introducing in the near future a Welsh curriculum that's tailored for Wales, having the right qualification system for Wales, that is something that we are proud of. We have ensured that more and more money has gone into the health service, even as we've seen that money being diminished year after year after year by a Tory government that is hell-bent on austerity. So I stand very proud by my record. The people of Wales clearly have an opinion on it, given the fact that I have been here for the past 9 years. Now, let's focus on one thing he has said, which I think is fair to point out to him. He has said, I understand, that he wishes to cut taxes, 9 pence in terms of income tax, getting rid of council tax, getting rid of business rates and the replacement with another form of taxation. But I have to say to him that that is a £6 billion gap that would need to be found. So what work, I'm not asking him a question, but it would be interesting to see what work has been done in order to make sure that his new proposals would plug what would be a very substantial gap.
Yeah, let's agree what the time that you have left, First Minister, in the terms of trade. I ask the questions and you give the answers. I mean, it's your record that's under the focus here. Now, maybe one of your proudest moments was a great unveiling ceremony when an Aston Martin car was draped in the Welsh flag in front of the Welsh Government's offices in Cadeirio'r Park. Now, what you've been less enthusiastic about revealing is precisely how much public money was used in order to secure the company's investment. You were compelled to reveal that the £5.8 million initial grant you gave by the Information Commissioner. It was literally dragged out of you, but you're now yet again refusing to say whether the company has had any additional money or confirm that you've underwritten some of Aston Martin's debt, despite the fact the company has itself confirmed that in the prospectus for its forthcoming flotation. So 2 questions, First Minister. Doesn't the Welsh public have a right to know about how much public money is being given to private companies? And secondly, why are we underwriting the debt of a company that is about to raise £5 billion on the London Stock Exchange?
So he accuses me of a lack of ambition. Yeah. And then he does down one of the biggest and most important investment projects Wales has ever had. 750 jobs coming to Wales, a centre of excellence for electric technology, for the Lagonda. And I can say to him, in the real world, you cannot deal with businesses if you say to them, every deal that we have with you, we will reveal in public. No one will come here. No one will come here. We will do as much as we can to make sure as much is in the public domain as possible. But if you're saying that if you were First Minister, you would conduct negotiations in public and have a deal that was made public, no one will come here. No one will come here now. They'll go elsewhere where they feel that they can have more confidence in the government. And secondly, I have to say this to him, that it's hugely important for us in Wales to show that we can attract investment, not just because of the money we put on the table. Aston Martin were clear about that. They said that there were better financial packages available elsewhere. Aston Martin said that they were impressed by the passion and professionalism of the Welsh Government. That's what we do. Show that passion, show that professionalism and bring jobs into Wales.
Yeah. The scandal of the answer that you've just given, First Minister, is that the company has put more information into the public domain than the government, which is meant to be acting in the public interest. Now, let's turn to Natural Resources Wales. You referred to the incoming chief executive. She's admitted serious failings at the organisation, which she attributed to incompetence, ineptitude, incompetence, but nothing more concerning. Yesterday, however, the Public Accounts Committee was told by the head of the UK Forest Products Association, David Sulman, that in his view, and I quote, "These actions were premeditated, deliberate, and made in the full knowledge of the facts. We really cannot believe," he stated emphatically, "that the actions we've seen can simply be explained away by incompetence." £1 million, First Minister, in Welsh public money has been lost, and the lead industry body is alleging dishonesty and deliberate malpractice by a public authority. Will you be asking that this matter is now referred to the police?
Well, I've seen no evidence that suggests the matter should be referred to the police. But of course, the Minister, the Cabinet Secretary, will be fully aware of the situation. No one can pretend that it's a good situation. Of course not. He goes a step further and suggests there has been criminal activity. That's something we have to consider very carefully to see whether there's any evidence there. And if there is, of course, then further action may need to be taken. And so we have, of course, the commitment by Natural Resources Wales' new Chief Executive. We will have a new chair in place. I have no doubt that there will be more that will need to be examined over the course of the next few weeks in order to provide the assurance that, in fairness, members want to see, and particularly what the government wants to see.
Group UKIP, Gareth.
Leader of the UKIP group, Gareth Bennett.
First Minister, you're probably aware of a recent report from the Future Generations Commissioner entitled Transport Fit for Future Generations. Thank you. On page 16, the report says that evidence consistently demonstrates that capacity increases on highway infrastructure generate more motorway trips, and generally, new capacity simply fills up over time, often leading to further congestion on the entire corridor or network. End of quote. The basic idea of the Future Generations Office, and it's not a new idea, is simply that the more roads that we build, the more cars use them, and we will ultimately end up back in the same situation that we were in the first place, with clogged up, congested roads. I think at some point your government will have to address the issue of how to get vehicles off the road as far as this can reasonably be achieved. For instance, at the moment, lots of people are driving into offices to do jobs that they could probably do at home. So what is the Welsh Government doing to encourage working from home in order to reduce pressure on Welsh road networks? Are you encouraging and incentivising companies and public sector organisations to allow more of their employees to work from home?
Well, yes, that's true, because for many, many people, it's perfectly possible to work at home, given the technology we have now, rather than having to come into an office in order to work. And I'm sure that companies, and indeed in the public sector as well, is looking at ways to ensure that people can deliver work at home. I know there are local authorities in Wales already doing this, and I know it's an issue that, as Welsh Government, we've been keen to encourage as well. Nevertheless, people will still have to travel, and the balance always has to be struck between the transport infrastructure that we need and, of course, the environmental considerations that come with that. But, of course, we are investing in the South Wales Metro. It's a huge, huge improvement proposed for South Wales. The same will be true further west, and the same will be true further north. And now, of course, with control of the franchise, we will, in time, be able to deliver the kind of train network that the people of Wales should expect.
Yes, I hear what you say about the South Wales Metro, First Minister, but I believe there are possible doubts over the future funding of it, given your government's commitment to the M4 Relief Road scheme. So there may be some uncertainty over the South Wales Metro. But anyway, I don't want to go down that avenue today. I suppose ultimately the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and we have come to a state of virtual gridlock at rush hour in many areas of Wales. So I would have to say that whatever measures you are taking to encourage working from home, they don't seem to be having an appreciable effect. Now, another pressure on road networks at certain specific times of the day is the school run, whereby parents pick up children and students from schools and colleges. I do sometimes wonder what effect your programme of school closures are having on the lengthening traffic jams. According to the school census results published by Statistics for Wales, there are almost 300 fewer local authority schools than there were 10 years ago. That is an average of nearly 30 schools closing every year in Wales. First Minister, would you agree that Welsh Government policy has actually driven more people into their cars for the school run?
Tenuous link. I mean, if he wants to, he can go up and down the length and breadth of Wales And he can see the new schools that have been built. Primary schools, comprehensive schools, and they have replaced, yes. Perhaps one school's been built to replace another 3, but the facilities available at the new schools are fantastic. It's always difficult when a community loses a school, of course it is. And these decisions have to be taken very, very carefully. But he tries to give the impression that somehow the fact that there are 300 fewer schools means that somehow education has suffered as a result. I'd argue the exact opposite. And we can see it in the results we have from our young people. The reality is, if he goes, for example, if he goes to Ceredigion, he will see there many, many new schools that have been built. They replace very, very small schools, and they are wonderful facilities. From my perspective, we in Wales will continue to build and refurbish schools because that's the commitment we make to our children's education.
Yes, I understand that the 21st Century Schools programme creates modernised school buildings, and I'm certainly not denigrating that. However, it does not necessarily create local schools. Indeed, the effect the programme has in some areas may be entirely the opposite. For example, the programme may create a modern school, but it may well be a school whose location forces more people to drive to school rather than walk to school as they did before. What assurance can you give us that any new schools built using the 21st Century Schools programme will be genuinely local and therefore minimise the need for long car journeys by parents?
I'm not sure I follow his argument. Many of the new schools that have been built are literally a few miles away from the schools that they were built to replace. It's not a situation where children suddenly have to travel 10 miles to go to school, where previously there was one on their doorstep. But we're proud of the fact that we in Wales have a commitment to building new schools, to refurbishing new schools. What is the point of keeping schools that are too small to be viable, or schools that are in buildings that are very, very difficult, particularly for modern technology? Yes, I've seen situations where people can be very concerned when a school that has been there for many, many, many years closes, but I've not yet come across anybody who has said, when they see a new school, that they'd like to go back to the old schools. What they see is a school that is a community facility, a school that offers all the best in terms of technology, it offers wonderful teaching space in a way that wasn't available to some of the older schools in Wales. I don't know what he's trying to say here, whether we should not have new schools or whether we should carry on with the same old buildings. For me, new schools mean better education for our pupils.
Question 3.
Question 3, Janet Finch-Saunders.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the provision of homelessness support in North Wales?
Welsh Government funding has helped to prevent homelessness for nearly 18,000 households across Wales since our progressive legislation was introduced. That does include over 3,000 from North Wales. In addition, over £5.1 million has been provided to the North Wales authorities to support implementation of the Housing Wales Act since April 2015.
Thank you, First Minister. However, I am becoming increasingly concerned at the rising numbers of those having to brave the elements without any accommodation, particularly so as we approach winter. In my own constituency of Aberconway, there are a growing number of vulnerable people sleeping rough. A week last Friday, a constituent approached my office requiring emergency accommodation and rehabilitation support after not having settled any accommodation for the past 12 months. After receiving no practical help from the local authority for over 4 hours where we looked after this individual in our office, we relied on the help of the wonderful Mrs Brenda Fogg of Hope Restored, a one-woman volunteer who has a very kind heart. She actually went out with blankets and food provisions. As of today, though, I am still awaiting some form of rehabilitation and accommodation from the local authorities for this individual. First Minister, what steps are you taking to ensure that all local authorities are fulfilling their obligations to the homeless and rough sleepers as per Section 73 of the Housing Act Wales 2014, to which this gentleman and my constituent are fully entitled?
Well, there has been a response, of course, to the Equality Local Government and Communities report into rough sleeping. We set out our detailed reply to the 29 recommendations that were contained there. Well, it's got to be said that welfare reform and the austerity agenda continues to create further pressure on households and their access to affordable accommodation. Nevertheless, it's true to say that implementation of the legislation has been inconsistent, and we are working with the WRGA, the Homelessness Network and others to make further progress to improve outcomes and create greater consistency.
Mandy Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, the winter is fast approaching and forecasts suggest that this is going to be a bad one. You never seem to answer questions and always blame it on Tory austerity. What assistance is your government planning to give to local authorities and the agencies who are on the front line dealing with the rough sleeping epidemic in Wales?
Well, specific funding has been targeted for North Wales and in particular Wrexham to help to tackle the issue of increased rough sleeping in the area. We do expect to receive a proposal to deliver an innovative partnership approach which will include both statutory and third sector partners. So the money is there. It's a question of getting the right project in place in order to assist those who need it.
Question 4, Helen.
Question 4, Helen Merrijohn.
Diolch, Llywydd. What discussions has the First Minister had with the Children's Commissioner for Wales with regard to legislation to promote the rights of children and young people?
Well, children's rights are already enshrined in Welsh law. Ministers have a legal duty to have due regard to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child when exercising any of their functions. And all ministers meet regularly with the Children's Commissioner. Indeed, I'm meeting with the Commissioner next week to discuss her latest annual report.
Thank you, First Minister. You will be aware that last week we welcomed to the National Assembly Bruce Adamson, the Children's Commissioner for Scotland, who gave the first annual commemorative lecture in memory of your predecessor, Rhodri Morgan. Speaking about the Welsh legislation, Mr Adamson said this: "There is so much that I like. I like the proactive approach to compliance. I think it gives stakeholders the opportunity to influence how children's rights are embedded in legislation and through policy making. But it is not full incorporation." In your meeting with the Children's Commissioner next week, First Minister, will you undertake to discuss with her if we may need to take further steps to fully incorporate the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, whether that be through an amendment to the existing measure or, if necessary, to a more far-reaching fully comprehensive incorporation? The issue, I think, is around, First Minister, the ability for the individual child to ensure that their rights are complied with and to have redress. So I would be very grateful, First Minister, if you will discuss this with our Children's Commissioner and see if she feels that there are further steps that should be taken.
Yes, I can give that assurance. We always look to learn from others. There are sometimes unexpected consequences with full incorporation in areas where some legal problems can be created. That has to be balanced, of course, against the rights of the child and the convention itself. But I will discuss it. I'm sure she'll discuss it with me in the course of this week to see if there's anything more that we can do to build on the commitment and the action we've already taken.
Susie Davis.
Diolch, Llywydd. On a similar point, actually, in the report on the measures Section 1 compliance, the Welsh Government has stated that there's a next step, its intention to review our strategy to support and highlight the importance of participation by children and young people in decisions which affect them. Now, I've raised before, and similar to Helen Mary, that this disconnect between the government policy and Assembly legislation, which should be made with a due regard to Article 12, amongst others, and the ability for public bodies who deliver that policy or legislation to observe or ignore Article 12 as it suits them, which means that policy or legislative intentions can sometimes be diluted or fail altogether. Obviously, we know about some instances of voluntary observance, but they're the exception rather than the rule. And whereas supporting and highlighting is all very well, but where expectation fails, legislation can step in. Do you think we might have reached that point now?
I've not seen evidence of it, but I'm open, of course, to any evidence that the Commissioner would want to produce in the course of this week to see whether there is evidence of a need to strengthen the commitment that we've already made. And I look forward to that conversation.
Question 5, Darren Miller.
Question 5, Darren Miller.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's commemorative programme in relation to the anniversary of the end of the First World War?
Well, as we near the end of the First World War centenary, the focus of commemoration will inevitably be the armistice. We will join the other UK nations in marking the centenary with a national service of Thanksgiving on the 11th of November, and that service will be held in Llandaff Cathedral.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. As you will know, people across Wales have been coming together over the past 4 years to mark the centenary of the events of the First World War, and I want to pay tribute to your government for its Cymru and Cofio Wales Remembers programme, which I think has been exceptionally good and has helped to focus the attention of the nation on what are very important events in our history. That programme, of course, will come to an end as a result of the end of the First World War. What work are you doing to ensure that the legacy of that programme can continue? And will you consider extending the opportunity to run, in particular, the website, which has been a very useful portal for commemoration of military events, well into the future and beyond the end of this centenary year?
Well, I can confirm that last year I agreed to continue the programme until 2020. The armistice was not the end, of course. We know that the Paris Peace Conference came and then the Treaty of Versailles, which led to the Second World War, but there's a limit to how far we can go in terms of dealing with the legacy of the First World War. Significant to Wales, of course, because there were two Welshmen involved, David Lloyd George and Billy Hughes. It is said they spoke Welsh to each other. I'm not quite sure, because Billy Hughes was brought up in London, but of Welsh parentage, as I believe. But anyway, it's hugely important because if young people are to understand the legacy of the First World War, then the legacy of the peace is clearly an important part of that, and what happened, how to get it wrong in terms of a peace treaty and how to create problems for the future. So it'll go to 2020. I can assure the member that we are now considering the legacy of the programme, how the resources that have been developed can be used in the future, and how we avoid a situation where it comes to an end in 2020 and everything's forgotten. That's the last thing we want to see.
Question 6,
Question 6, Dawn Bowden.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the NHS support for mental health services in the criminal justice system?
We do recognise that offenders have a higher prevalence of mental health issues in the general population. We do work with a range of partners, including the prison and probation services and police forces in Wales, to provide mental health support for people in the criminal justice system.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. During my recent work with health services in Merthyr Tydfil and Rumney, I was very struck by the high incidences of mental health problems amongst people in parts of our criminal justice systems. And I took particular interest in the amount of police time being taken up by the duty of care that they hold towards such vulnerable people. I know we have some incredible initiatives actually to help address this, like the Clinical Advisor Project in the Gwent Force police area, a model which is soon to be rolled out in the South Wales Force area. But what further action can Welsh Government take to ensure places of sanctuary are provided for people with mental health issues, which in turn can help to free up police resources for frontline policing?
Well, of course, policing is a non-devolved service. Mental health provision is devolved. It's right to say in 2017 police powers were extended in order to assist people with mental health issues, and there's a great deal of collaborative working with the commissioners, with the police forces, and also with the Mental Health Crisis Concord and Assurance Group and the regional mental health and criminal justice groups. We have made £7 million available annually since 2015 to 16 to improve provision for people who present in crisis. There is an advice line that offers support, confidential support, 24 hours a day as well. In terms of new actions, we have prioritised access to crisis and out-of-hours care in the Mental Health Transformation and Innovation Fund, and we've received proposals that include around £1 million to support a range of interventions, extending crisis care, liaison services and street triage. So we will continue to work with the partners that we have in this field in order to make sure that people are steered away from the criminal justice system and towards a service that is more appropriate to them. It's something that I saw in the early 1990s, where people ended up in prison because quite often they had been long-term in the psychiatric hospitals. They left, they didn't get the support that they needed, they ended up in the criminal justice system. And that's a situation that clearly we want to avoid in the future.
Mohammed Ashkan.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. First Minister, in England, offenders with mental health problems are being referred to health services as part of communities' sentences in an effort to steer them away from the jails. Under a pilot scheme in 5 areas, psychologists and panel comprising justice and health officials have been providing information to judges or magistrates to determine whether offenders should be required to receive treatment. A recent Ministry of Justice study found that when offenders were given mental health treatment requirement as part of their sentence, they were significantly less to re-offend. Will the First Minister undertake to hold discussion with the Ministry of Justice about introducing a similar scheme in Wales, please?
That's not a particularly new scheme. I mean, schemes of that sort have been around for many, many, many years in terms of looking to deal with people for whom prison is not the appropriate response when they find themselves in the criminal justice system. Now, I don't know who funds those schemes, whether they're funded by the Ministry of Justice. Justice, of course, is not as yet devolved. But clearly, we will always look at pilots elsewhere. I mean, as I say, it's not clear what these pilots are designed to do at the moment, nor is it clear who is funding them. But if there was funding available from the MOJ, well, of course, it's something that we'd like to look at.
Bethan Syed.
Clearly, there's a link between drug abuse and mental health problems, and from research I've looked at today, it would cost about 500 million to deal with drug-related crime for the individuals involved here in the UK. Now, there are many arrest referral schemes, but the take-up for that is quite low, and they do things like methadone maintenance programmes to reduce both illegal heroin and related crime. They have medically supervised detoxification and counselling services, as has been mentioned previously. Now, I know we don't have power over the criminal justice system here in Wales, although on these benches we would like to see that come here. So what are you doing in relation to trying to target resources at those who are dependent on drugs in our society? I went out with police in Port Talbot only a few weeks ago, and most of the people that we went out to assess or to look at were on drugs, were on heroin. This is something that is around us every day. How are you getting to grips with these particular schemes and working with the UK government to ensure that they're working here in Wales?
Well, tackling drug misuse is a complex issue. We've always seen it in terms of health, rather than in terms of it being a crime. The suppliers and the dealers are criminals. The users are victims, and they are people who need help through the health system rather than through the criminal justice system. We have, of course, the substance misuse strategy and the plans that are associated with that. And, of course, that guides what we are doing in terms of reducing the harm associated with substance misuse. In terms of misuse in prisons, well, the services are delivered in line with clinical guidance and with prison health teams. We also have a programme called Take Home Naloxone, which provides to prisoners at the point of release within prisons across Wales. That's helped to target drug-related deaths in the community. And naloxone, of course, is a drug that reverses the effects of a heroin overdose, or indeed a morphine, the morphine drugs and that family, overdoses of those drugs, and brings people back very quickly, in seconds, from a situation where perhaps they're in difficulty with breathing, particularly, and in danger of dying. So being able to provide the immediate support for people to avoid dying of a drug overdose is the first step. Secondly, of course, the substance misuse strategy looks at moving people on long-term away from the drugs that have captured their lives for many years.
Question 7, Mark.
Question 7, Mark Reckless.
Will the First Minister make a statement on whether the Welsh Government supports a further EU referendum?
Well, if the Prime Minister isn't able to secure agreement on the final terms of the UK's exit from the EU, to my mind, there should be a general election. If there's no general election, or if a general election throws up an inconclusive result, how else can the issue be resolved other than through a second referendum?
It could be resolved by doing what you said in 2016, First Minister, when you said that you respected the result of the referendum, that you accepted the decision made by the people and would not work against the referendum result. Even in March this year, you said, "I am not questioning Brexit. The UK is leaving the EU." Notwithstanding what you said before, isn't it clear, First Minister, from your answer today and your amendment tomorrow, that you want to betray the democratic decision of the people of Wales?
Well,
How were you elected?
could I remind the member that he sits on the benches of a party who for 8 years demanded a second referendum on devolution? The 1997 referendum was not accepted by the Conservative Party. In 2005, they ran on a manifesto promise of a second referendum. So the double standards here are absolutely breathtaking. Now, let me move on to the point that he makes. Well, how do you resolve the issue? If Britain leaves with no deal, are we really saying that the people have no right to express an opinion on that? Because nobody 2 years ago, not even him, nobody 2 years ago said a no-deal Brexit is likely. No one said it. Everybody said, Nigel Farage said it, the Brexiteers said it, it'll be the easiest negotiation in the world, we'll have a free trade agreement like that, the German car manufacturers will drive it, etc., etc. You've heard me say it in this chamber. But surely, if there's no deal, people have a right to express a view as to what they think about that. They may say, well, let's leave with no deal. They may say that. They may say, well, let's... I'm not taking any advice from UKIP. Their current policy is a second referendum devolution anyway. without actually realising the irony in their comments. If people find themselves in a situation where a no-deal Brexit is all that is on the table, when nobody mentioned a no-deal Brexit 2 years ago, is it actually honest to say to people, tough luck, 2 years ago you had your say on this, all right, this option wasn't discussed or wasn't on the table, but it's too bad because you've already expressed a view. I don't think that's democracy. People surely should have the opportunity, whether, my preference, whether through a general election that would then throw up a decisive result, then there would be no need for a referendum at that point, or secondly, if the election was inconclusive, what's so bad about asking the people about this who took the decision in the first place?
You ignore what they tell you.
Steffan Lewis.
Diolch, Llywydd. I'm still at a loss to understand exactly why the First Minister thinks that a conclusive general election, presumably with a Labour victory that he would want, would help his government further securing Wales's future, which I am still assuming is the policy of the Welsh Government. Because if there is a majority Labour government in any snap general election, we will be leaving the single market and leaving the customs union, and the people would have absolutely no right to have a say on that question properly. So, again, and even looking again at the question of timeframes, presuming there is a general election in January, without extending Article 50, that's 2 months, 3 months max, the Labour government would have to negotiate our departure from the single market and customs union, which is, of course, precisely the policy of the current United Kingdom government. So rather than going down through all of that nonsense, why can't the First Minister say, let the people decide and let them decide now?
Well, the difficulty is this, isn't it? There's no deal on the table as yet. So you'll be asking people to take a decision without knowing what the full consequences are. I think they need to be fully informed. They weren't 2 years ago. They'd be fully informed of what the consequences would be. Now, it would take just as long to organise a referendum. To my mind, a general election would give the opportunity for the parties to set out their stalls in detail as to what they think Brexit should look like, and on that basis, people can vote accordingly. If there is an inconclusive result, then he's right. How else do you resolve the issue other than through asking the very same people who took the decision 2 years ago whether, in the full knowledge of what they know now, they want to go ahead? The problem has always been this. 2 years ago, people were asked to vote for an idea. There was no plan, an idea, and people would interpret it in different ways. There are some in this chamber who would interpret the vote in 2016 as a vote for any kind of Brexit, no deal or not. There are others like me who interpret it as a vote for Brexit, but not on whatever terms get thrown at the UK. When we had our referendums for devolution, people could, if they wished, look at the document that would tell them exactly what would happen if they voted yes. That didn't happen in 2016. So surely, if we are in that situation where there's no deal or a bad deal, that people have the right to be able to express a view as to what they want to do. Just trust the people.
Question 8, Andrew.
Question 8, Andrew Davies.
Officer, will the First Minister make a statement on Cardiff and Vale Health Board's winter plans?
Well, the Health Board continues to report the best performance in Wales against unscheduled care targets, which should support resilience as we enter the difficult winter period. We have received its integrated winter delivery plan and provided tailored feedback to inform further enhancement of its plan.
Thank you, First Minister. I appreciate that the day-to-day delivery of health service provision in Cardiff and Vale is the Health Board's responsibility, but there's a level of interaction between the Welsh Government and the Health Board. And one of the key pinch points last year was the provision of beds within the hospitals within that area. What certainty can you give the people of Cardiff and Vale that there will be additional beds made available to deal with access pressures that undoubtedly will occur through the winter months?
I'm fully aware, as I stand here every week, that there is a level of accountability to ministers in terms of questions that need to be answered. Preparations for the winter have been taking place throughout Wales and across organisational boundaries since last winter. There was a review of what happened last year. 5 key priorities have been collectively identified for delivery to support greater resilience next winter. We have now received integrated health and social care winter delivery plans from all the health boards, from the Welsh Ambulance Service and from local authority partners. They align to the priorities, and officials were encouraged by the level of assurance provided by the local health and care system in Cardiff and the Vale, with a high number of actions already well embedded or being implemented to strengthen winter delivery to local people.
Canola question now.
Finally, question 9, Rhyn Apio.
Prif weinidog ddatganiad am fewnbwn Llywodraeth Cymru i gais y grid cenedlaethol i'r arolygiaeth gynllunio i adeiladu pelonau ar draws Ynys Môn.
Mae Llywodraeth Cymru yn gors statudol ar gyfer prosiectau
Well, the Welsh Government is a statutory body for national significant infrastructure projects in Wales. As part of the processes, we responded to the consultation and we are currently considering the evidence presented as part of the Development Consent Order application.
Thank you. That application has been submitted, but the grid, since the beginning of this process, haven't given an inch to the pressure from me, the Member of Parliament or the Council, and the unanimity of the people of Anglesey that we need to underground these cables. And let's recall that this chamber favoured undergrounding rather than pylons and voted for that. You said in January that you'd remind the grid of that. So what was their response? But most importantly, or more importantly, will you give a commitment to push as much as possible as Welsh Government on the British Planning Inspectorate to ensure that the democratic views of this Parliament had been expressed and that they must respect that, and further with a further suggestion that a tunnel which could put cables under the Menai could cost £300 million. Isn't it clear that it would be a scandal if the money or part of that money weren't spent on a new bridge to carry cables and vehicles, with the rest being invested in undergrounding?
Well, we, of course, as a government, have told the grid that it's extremely important to consider a third crossing, a third bridge over the Menai Strait, in order to ensure that the cables can go on that bridge. There is a formal agreement between ourselves and the grid to consider that opportunity, and I would imagine that it would be totally sensible thing to do. I don't know, because we are a statutory party to this, we will be taking part in the DCO inspection itself, and we will be looking at the common land with the grid itself. But the grid knows the view of this Assembly and the view of local people, and we must ensure that any impact on the area is kept to the minimum.
Thank you, First Minister. The next item, therefore, is